MamStartup Podcast. Dowiedz się, jak wygląda rzeczywistość polskiego ekosystemu startupowego.
Hi, it's Marta from MamStartup Podcast, and today we're talking with Mick Griffin, Chief Growth Officer, co-founder at TRAFFIT, but also a co-founder of Growth 52, former CEO and founder of Pipeline Summit, Chief Revenue Officer at Brand24, and Sales Director at GetResponse, just to name a few. Hi, Mick.
Hi. Yes, that when you say it like that, it sounds a little bit crazy.
Well, maybe not crazy, but I would like to ask you, to get the ball rolling, let's say, how did you end up in startup world and what actually gets you hooked on it?
Oh, great. Yes, let's get into this because I like this story a little bit because actually I got into the startup world by accident. 100%, which is kind of crazy. So I'll try to give the really elevated version of my little background. So long story short is when I was 16 back in the UK, when I was living in Manchester, I became a professional rugby player. So at 16, I kind of turned off all the higher education. So there was no college, no university, no further learning. I had a choice at 16 and decided to be a professional rugby player. And then at 20, it finished, that journey finished. I didn't carry on that path. And I was like, oh no, wait, what am I going to do? I don't want to be that old guy in the class who's 4 years older than everyone else and get back into higher education. So I took jobs in regular sales jobs in the UK. So call center work, etc. And then basically came to Poland 15 years ago for personal reasons. And honestly thought when I was coming to Poland, I was going to be an English teacher. And I didn't want to be, but I was like, if you move to another country where English is not the first language, that counts you out of 99% of the jobs. Why would anyone hire someone that can't speak Polish? So I ended up getting a job for a UK company who had a little tiny office in Gdynia, doing similar kind of basic marketing, sales kind of jobs, but in like a corporation environment. And then I got fired. It turned out that also I couldn't be an English teacher. I was really bad at it. I then realized very quickly that speaking English and teaching is a very different thing. And I got very, very lucky that one of my team members that I was working in this little office in Gdynia with said, hey, listen, there's a company down the road called GetResponse. They do some stuff in technology, but I think that they are selling outside of Poland. Maybe you should talk to them. And they had no job posted on the website. And I just literally wrote to the hello@GetResponse email address kind of thing and said, hey, listen, open for a role. Maybe you need somebody. That we had an interview. And I've always said this. I think I got so lucky because I think that they hired me because I was English, not because of my skill set.
Okay. And how big was GetResponse at the time?
And then it was probably like 60, 70 people. They had a little office in Canada for customer support for the US customers they had. But at the time, I was really lucky because it was quite rare to have a native English speaker in Gdynia, right there and then. Who was obviously by then I was super happy earning Polish level salaries and so on. Everything was fine. So I truly think that they hired me and thought we'll use him somewhere. And that journey kind of was me. I was in the company in kind of marketing and social media for about half a year. And then I looked and said, hey, listen, I think I can do some business development, some sales. And that's when I got hooked into startup world. That was like that big first hook. And I ended up spending 6 years in GetResponse mostly in sales, I would say.
Okay. So you kind of grew with the company into the kind of more that sales growth direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got very lucky because they gave a lot of freedom. They were like, I came in and said, listen, you don't have a sales department. Can I try? And the CEO said, go for it. And then, hey, listen, it's working. Can I try? Yes. Can you go for it? But I still would say that it wasn't startup world because GetResponse was already 70 people. It was really, at the time I joined, it was already, I think, 10 years old. And it wasn't in the traditional startup world in the fact that it was 100% bootstrapped. So there was no outside investment, no VC funding, no raising, etc. So it was a startup in some respects, but it was so unique that when I transitioned to Brand24, that's when I truly understood what a startup was. So I would say more that, GetResponse felt much more like a medium-sized tech company.
So why did you decide to leave GetResponse and go to Brand24?
That's so, the nice thing about this, where again, I'm going to use this word a lot. Like I think I got lucky, but that was my first career change where I changed for a person, not for the job. And what I mean by that is that I just luckily, like lots of people in Poland, I started seeing what Brand24 was doing, what Michał Sadowski was doing, and I just genuinely had that feeling, which we have sometimes, which is I bet it would be cool to work there. And again, pure stroke of luck was that I was doing some consulting for a small tech company in Gdynia, and they offered me a full-time job. And ironically, I'd only met Michał Sadowski probably once or twice in person, and we had a small friendship, but nothing more. And I actually asked him for advice. I was like, hey, listen, there's this small startup. They're in a very niche tech sector. What do you think? Should I take the job? And that's when Michał literally said to me, I was actually really hoping that I would hire you. We are not ready yet to hire you. And what Michał did is he went away and talked to his investors. We did like a really kind of, let's say, heavy negotiation. We kind of came up to that scenario of like, okay, we can try this. Let's do that. So, and the first time I ever experienced Brand24 as a product was on my first day of full employment. I didn't care about product. I think Michał Sadowski could have been selling umbrellas and I would have been excited about the opportunity. So, and I'd never done that before. I'd always gone like most of us are lucky enough to apply for jobs when they are there. And these are these rare occasions where I luckily found a job that I didn't know existed, let's say.
And Brand24 was a still young company when you joined, wasn't it?
Yes. Gonna guess that it was probably about somewhere between 50 and 20 people, something like that. But this was also that moment where I was lucky. I felt a difference because, Michał and Piotr, the co-founders, kind of brought me in and said like, okay, we want you to be like next to us. We want you to start building. You're not an employee. You're here to actually grow us fast, bring your expertise and knowledge. So they treated me, I don't really like this term of C-level people. I think it's very elitist, but that's where they brought me in and they kind of said like, so ironically, I didn't come in with a job description with KPIs. They just said, let's build. So that was also a very unique experience to have such a wide scope and also such an access to the founders, because at GetResponse, Szymon Grabowski is the founder, who is a great guy, but that was already a big organization. So you didn't need to interact with him on a daily basis, a weekly basis even. And suddenly you're in Brand24 and I'm probably talking to Michał daily. But for 6 years, probably daily, by the way, as well. But it was a totally different experience to have that much closeness with a leader, let's say.
And how was that change coming from like 60, 70 people company to a smaller company, venture-backed company, without a specific role? Just, okay, come in and let's see how it goes.
Such a roller coaster. And again, not to sugarcoat it, because some things were fantastic and some things were really hard learning curves. Like, so the freedom was nice, and I still was coming from one thing that I think I can still laugh about with Michał is that for the first year I was probably asking him a lot, am I doing a good job? Which we wouldn't normally do. I mean, I probably don't do it anymore now, but I still remember that kind of, we have to remember that freedom was super great, and I learned all the skills I had and I didn't have. But I'd come from a role in a company where you were getting constant, not even feedback, you were getting an understanding if you were doing good or bad or different. So when you go into a startup and there's no benchmark, there's no history of what's good or bad, that you felt that space. So one learning curve was like, I would say to me, how like, what do you think? Is that good? And sometimes you'd have to be like, I don't know, Mick, that's why we hired you. So because one of the things that I would say also completely changed in that job, moving from one to the other, was GetResponse didn't really I wasn't involved in the Polish ecosystem at that time. I didn't have a network in Poland other than people who worked at GetResponse. I had more network from US events than I did in Poland. And when I moved to Brand 24, I realized how important network is, because how many times you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't know the answer, but no one in my company does either. What do I do? And that was when suddenly I, started to go to more Polish events, connect with more people doing what I was doing. And also, being like, I was very lucky that I got to be piggybacked into that. At the time, Brand 24 being probably one of the shining lights in the Polish startup space. So suddenly it was like, who's this guy from Brand 24? Way before people were like, oh, it's Mick. Like, people didn't know who I was, but they knew Brand 24. So it opened a lot of doors, but that was and then my shell shock experience was my first experience with investors. I remember going to the first couple of investor meetings and being blown away. Like,
Why?
absolutely. Because, at GetResponse, when you have a solo founder who's bootstrapped and extremely wealthy, by the way, at that point, already super successful, it was every decision, every concept was down to him. So if I missed a target for a month or a quarter, I would have to sit down with him, and between ourselves, we would just agree if it's okay or not. And then you go into an investor meeting and investors are like, hey, listen, but your churn is up 0.2%. Why? And you're like, oh, wait, I'm not ready for that. Wait, okay. And then it would be like, especially around predictions, like, oh, you're predicting that you're going to grow this much. Why only this much? And you're like, wait, what do you mean? Like, so that, and don't be wrong, I think that's great. I learned to love that accountability across more fields, more eyes, more ears. But it was just, I can only imagine it as like, imagine walking into school one day and finding out you have a 4-hour exam that you never studied for. It was, I always laugh about the physical thing, that you feel yourself even getting a little bit hotter, a little bit warmer. Like, the stress levels were very high, but then you learn that's because there are millions of zlotys at stake. And in the past, I never had that experience before.
What I found interesting is that from what you said, you kind of are a self-learner. So you kind of pave the path for yourself in sales, in growth. And then when you came to Brand 24, you being that self-learner and coming to a company with no specific title, no specific KPIs, had to be a very interesting experience from that point of view.
I mean, yes, it did, because, I've always craved that knowledge of myself, of what is my limit, how good am I, let's say. And you know what, I think I was well experienced in this because of my professional sport background. I'd got very young age, I went through that phase of like going up to being I was very lucky at 16, I played for England in the UK. So you reach the peak, but I'd also experienced coming back down. And at 20 years old, someone saying, hey, Mick, you're not really good enough to keep going. So I think that part of my young professional life, I took into startup world. So it was great to someone to say, well, hey, Mick, listen, what we need to find a way to get 10 customers from the USA, and we don't know how we're going to do it. And I've learned that now, probably that is exactly my skill set. And I also know by default that I love going and doing that. But what is not my skill set is when a company's like, we have 10,000 customers and we need to get to 20,000. That's not my skill set. I don't believe I'm the scale guy. I'm the startup guy. That's what my history is showing me so far. But I got, again, very lucky because I learned at Brand 24, that's what I'm good at. I had super supportive founders in the company who would support me. Michał Sadowski had very similar approach to growing Brand 24. He wasn't going out and traditionally hiring VP of sales from Silicon Valley. He was recording a video in the car park kind of thing. And that's my style. Like, laptop, smartphone, what can we do? So I just, again, a really, really ideal place and time for me. But also, like I said, you find yourself in those voids. People joke, and people don't think I'm serious when I can say, like, I would have been in Brand 24 3 years, let's say, and I'd been a board meeting or an investor meeting, and someone would say, well, hey, listen, you're your ARPU or your LTV is too high or too low. And I would sit in the board meeting and I would slowly unlock my phone under the table and Google what is LTV and how is it calculated, because I genuinely didn't know. I just didn't know. And I'm okay with that. But that was, like I said, it was a learning curve on the fly for sure.
I'm also interested because being that self-learner and kind of building that path of your own, I'm kind of curious, did you ever miss having that kind of traditional path, clear kind of roles and those kind of mentor figures, or did you find those mentors somewhere else?
I mean, yes, for certainly, and I think you can't have too many of them. I think I'm lucky enough at TRAFFIT and at Brand 24. I've always still luckily had partners in the companies who I could brainstorm with, fire ideas off. Is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? But having that source of knowledge that I trusted in, that's challenging. And I never want to be the smartest person in the room. Like this maybe I thought it was cool in my 20s, but it's definitely not cool in your 30s. I mean, because in startup world, that comes with sleepless nights. It comes with the fact that if I'm not going to do this, who will, etc. And I've always had great team members in my companies, in my teams, but this is where, when you gave me this introduction, it was very, very nice. But this is why there was ideas like Pipeline Summit, like Growth 52, because I have this craving for people to tell me what's working, what's not working, etc., and not having to fly to Silicon Valley to get it, or New York, or whatever. So that's why I said investors can sometimes be a love-hate relationship, but TRAFFIT, we don't have traditional VC investors, and I miss it sometimes. I do miss it. The right investor is worth gold, because they are TRAFFIT. Myself and Adrian's the CEO or the founder. So many decisions we have two brains to consider how we do it. Do we like it? And luckily, some of those things go our way, but there's something good to somebody holding you accountable, where somebody says, hey, listen, why are those numbers down for the last 3 months? Now, yes, in the moment, you can feel under pressure and, oh my God, what a horrible thing. Why are they making me feel bad? But companies need that. You need someone. And I think it's extremely hard to do that for yourself. It's really hard to be self-accountable.
I think that's kind of a struggle for startups, because on the one hand, you want to look at those numbers and analytics. You want to take from the kind of traditional business what works. But on the other hand, you need to be aware of the fact that you're a smaller company, that you work a little bit different, and that different things might just work for you. And the traditional things you're not there yet just. And to find that balance in a way, or just your place somewhere on that timeline, it can be tricky.
And that's what investors taught me, which I love, which is you can go into the investors and say, hey, listen, the numbers are down, but the reason is, look at the economy. And investors will say, so what? What are you going to do about it? Now, sometimes when you're a founder or bootstrapped, you can say, well, I think the excuse is good enough. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. And sometimes you really need someone that's going to say to you, so what? And I always say, especially I learned this through sales, which is excuses do not pay the bills. They're not going to keep you warm. Like, excuses, you need to know them, but that can't be the end of that story. You can't just have a reason why something doesn't work. You've got to then go, okay, I know why it didn't work. What now? And investors are great for that. Investors are really great for saying, well, hey, listen, we still need to grow. We still need to grow. What else can you do? And I think that's a learning curve that you get in the early starts in your career that I think it's almost impossible to get that before you've worked in the industry a couple of years, because we're not getting that from the education system. We're not really getting that from colleges and universities, because when you fail an exam, you basically fail an exam or whatever. But so it's a really good lesson. It's a really hard lesson, because you sit there and some days this is why I'm addicted to Red Bull, by the way, in a really bad way, because you sit there and you hit the wall, and you're looking for that breakthrough. Like I said, that's why I think I'm startup guy, because I like that now. I love that. I love when people come to me and say, Mick, I have a problem. Like, brainstorm problems all day long. It doesn't mean my suggested solutions are going to work, but in most cases I can come up with 4 or 5 suggestions, and that's what I like. That's where I am.
Yeah, I think that in startups, sometimes you either have to have a lot of courage to try new things and just think it differently, or just don't have that awareness of how things work in a so-called traditional business. So you just are more open and innovative to think of new ideas.
Yeah, and I think in Poland that's amplified, because I think traditionally the Polish culture is to think about what can go wrong, even more so than some of the other cultures I know. And that's obviously because of history. Let's not pretend it's not. But what I mean is that I explained this recently, that if somebody said to you, your business has a 1 in 10 chance of success, I believe in Poland, majority of us think that we are going to be one of the 9, because mathematically we would be. In places like the USA, in some other countries, they think, okay, I'm going to be the 1. That's me. 1 in 10. I love those odds. And that is something that sometimes talks us out of doing some really cool stuff. It's because we think it probably won't work. But what I like is, I'm like, let's go find out. I think we worry about, not getting too much off the topic of professional life, but, one of the great sayings I like is 90% of the things we worry about never happen. And this is how I try to bring that into startup world, where let's find out. And also, like you said, finally, if it doesn't work out, it's also okay.
Yeah, I think we're also kind of touching on the topic with investors, that sometimes it's hard, because you do have those investors in the venture-backed businesses who may not be that open for trying, and going out that much, because they are there at the back end and say, okay, but your results, the numbers, it's just not adding up.
I mean, yes, certainly, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm super experienced with investors. We been in a couple of scenarios of trying to raise rounds, and I'm very lucky to know some people in funds. And I still think the big thing that investors are truly giving you money is into you as an individual most of the times. And if you believe enough, even if an investor thinks, looking at the numbers, I'm not sure, if you believe enough, they will come around. If you go to an investor with a super conservative, pessimistic approach because, hey, listen, that might not work out, they're going to feed on the pessimism. But I think you've got to go for it. I think that's, and I can tell you a nice example of this. A couple of years ago, I had a really good idea for a startup. And I know it was good. I even did some research, I had the numbers and I checked it. And I went to a couple of friends of mine in the VC space who were really like leaders of VC companies. I was like, oh, I like this idea kind of thing. And they were like, sounds great. Like, we'd be interested. I was like, yeah, but I'm going to do it on the side because I don't want to be a founder. I don't think I want to go all in startup guy. And they instantly said no. And I was like, but what about if we take a software company to build it? And no. And I was like, okay, tell me, like, doesn't matter how good the idea is if we don't have the person in the process that wants to do it. And that person, we really need them all in. We don't want them to do it on the side. So it proved to me that investors are mostly looking at founders. And this is why we get all frustrated when someone can go on the market and raise $500 million for an idea. I think the founder of WeWork did it a year ago or something, and instantly got tons because they're investing in the person. They're not investing so much in the idea, because I think that there are some fantastic startups that you never heard of because the people didn't deliver, even if the idea was phenomenal, let's say. So I think that's a case, but I think that's easily solved. I think it's easily with investors. It's super easily solved. It's somebody asked me about this yesterday. It's harder when you have C-level people in your company that don't believe. Because someone said to me, "What if my CFO won't give me some money to do that idea?" That's way harder than your investor saying, "I don't think you should do that," because God love investors. You can just ignore them. And if you truly believe and go and say, hey, listen, I did it anyway. It either worked, look, or it didn't work. I'm sorry, I will try to fix it. But investors are there to advise. They're not there to approve and deny in most cases. And we have to we have to use them as a resource, but they are not inside the business. But internally, it can be harder to get those ideas through.
Did you have that situation that you wanted to try something new, do something different, and your co-founders, founders, or some other people making the higher decision were not up to it?
I mean, definitely over the last few years with TRAFFIT and Brand 24, and I love being proven wrong. So like, as long as the problem I have is I'm quite an energetic, enthusiastic person. So I know that sometimes I'm very convincing. So it's hard to say no to me. It's really hard because I'm like, if I have an idea, I'm going all in. And what I like is that when I've had partners like Michał and Piotr at Brand 24, Adrian at TRAFFIT, because they know me so well now, they know how to say, yes, I'm really happy that you're excited, but here's my point of view. But what I'm also that kind of person that if I've got an idea, I'll just build it. So what I mean is you limit yourself to approval processes when you need help. In early stage startups, like super early stage, I did this at Brand 24. I remember doing it at TRAFFIT. Sometimes at 11 o'clock, you're just opening up a landing page builder. You're putting your idea online and you've got a link generator and off you go. And again, let's learn on the fly. Where you need to be more diplomatic and where you need to be a better communicator is when you're like, hey, listen, I've got this really good idea. If I'm wrong, it will affect other parts of the business. Because if you create a landing page for an idea and it fails or it doesn't generate the revenue that you want, it's not such a big deal if it doesn't. But there are certain ideas, like at TRAFFIT, I had the idea of transparent salaries. Yeah. I can't just decide to do that. You have to be an effective communicator. You have to, and of course, with something like that, you have to hear the pros, the cons, the good side, the bad side, etc. But no, I mean, I'm very lucky that I think I've probably also earned the trust that I have by probably just being right more than I'm wrong. And I've just been very lucky with that. I mean, that's just how I am. But no, it's actually have to commit from the other side, and I have to sometimes reassure, especially my team, remember you can tell me no. Remember you can tell me it's a bad idea. Remember you can tell me that I think actually you get to a certain kind of position in your career where you realize that people are not telling you that you're wrong, and it's not a good place to be either. I need people to feel comfortable challenging me and telling me my ideas are wrong. So it's probably not such a problem with people above me or partnering. I think it's really important as you grow, you've got to encourage and give your team the courage to tell you, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think you should do that. That's kind of important.
I wanted to come back to Brand 24 for a moment, because you said that you came there without a specific role or KPI, and I kind of wonder how that not how that happened, but how did it go? How did you build that way within the company for yourself?
One thing I think I talked to a different founder about this just recently, which is founders really respond to confidence as well. So when I was given that freedom, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't asking what should I do. And I think that just probably gave me and Piotr that confidence, like he's doing something kind of thing. But again, they kind of gave me a little bubble to work in, which helped as well, which they were like, hey, listen, this is what's happening internationally right now, but we're not really doing that much with it. So you've got blank piece of paper. So they gave me a little office in Gdańsk because everyone else was in Wrocław. I was able to hire for my team in Gdańsk. But I think, I really enjoy this. I mean, I really, really enjoy this part. I mean, people are laughing about the fact that I spent 6 years and I changed the job. I can't predict that's ever going to be the future. Hopefully, I won't be so predictable. But there is something really nice about that early phase. And that's what someone said recently. Like when I said that I'm not the guy who's good at scaling, and I'm really not. I'm not good at looking at the imperfections and optimizing little pieces. And I heard some really good advice from a founder once, which was, when you have someone like me in your company and I reach that limit, give them a new blank piece of paper. So what they would do is say, okay, now Mick, let's go do it in Brazil. or something like that. You create a startup within a scale up kind of thing. And I was like, thank goodness there's light in the tunnel for me, because I'm really bad at the scaling part, let's say. So I think I liked it. Like I said, I had a problem for the first year at least of still needing reassurance, still needing that approval of tell me I'm good, tell me I'm doing a good job, like a puppy kind of thing. And sometimes Michał used to just say, like, dude, just do it. Like, get to a phase where the numbers, the results will tell you you're doing a good job, because it's really doesn't matter if I think you are or not. And I get that. I do appreciate that now. That was it. I still think I struggle with it. I'm not good with, we all talk about this buzzword of imposter syndrome, but it's very real, and it's very hard to tell yourself you're doing a good job. And we're in the world of SaaS and technology and startups where 30% conversion can be amazing, but it can be 35. There's no peak of the mountain, and that sometimes just, like, I have to remind myself of that sometimes, that yes, everything can be better. It doesn't mean that you can do it. It doesn't mean that it has to be today, but everything can be better. And that's something that makes me think sometimes that working in startups, sometimes maybe you need to give yourself, and this is something I'm considering now, is there a maximum amount of time in your life that you can work in startups?
That's interesting.
And I'm really really hope, or I think might become way more normal in the next 10 years, are things like sabbaticals, where people take 6 months off, 9 months off, 12 months off, and then they come back. Because I'm now 15 years in tech startups, and it's not easy. It's not easy. I know it's not supposed to be, but it's, I think if someone said to me, you can have 6 months off every 5 years, I think that would be phenomenal. Probably not realistic, but I really hope I start to see a little bit more on LinkedIn. Sabbaticals are starting to be a little bit more normalized, and I think it's probably very healthy. And then you can work in startups for 40 years if you have a break.
Yeah, I also think that startups can be addictive, especially in working in a startup. And I don't have that experience, but I think it might be a little bit different when you are, a founder, because, it's literally your company. But also when you are working within a startup, it kind of, because it's so small and because you really do have that hands-on experience and you really do have the potential to change something and do something that will really affect the business, it kind of feels like it's also your company, even though it's not. And I think it's really easy to kind of get in over your head in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that, like, some kind of ego stroking takes place. I mean, I still get very excited by vanity metrics, and we'll run a campaign and we'll talk about this. TRAFFIT launched a library, I think 5 weeks ago. Seeing like 400 people sign up is like, yeah, it's good. I know when you're at the founder level, you have like the good and bad side. That hasn't increased your revenue in any way yet. But if we only focus on revenue numbers every single day, I mean, it's a very, very hard, depressing place to be. And this is why I think, I learned from Brand24 that, you can grow a company and have a good time doing it. I mean, got very recently, after watching the movie about Nike, I got very much into Nike's values, and one of their values that sticks with me, which is they have this one that says it's as much about the battle as the result, basically. So it kind of gave me this epiphany that you've got to enjoy trying to make your company successful. Because if you only wait for it to be successful, startups is a crazy place. Because, we're talking about, people ask me advice about things like equity and shares and MSOP programs and ESOP programs. And I'm sure that out there are many professionals that have shares in a company that they will never be able to cash out, because startup world works that way sometimes. It's how often do startups go to IPO or something like that, and that money becomes available. So you've got to enjoy the experience, because if you're only waiting to be a millionaire, I think it's not fun. It's not fun at that point.
Yeah. I think it's, again, we're coming back to, I think, the balance. But sometimes I think I was talking with Piotrek Grabowski from Foodtech AC, and he said that he believes that there is not such a thing and kind of work-life balance in startup world. There's work-life mixture in a way.
I think one of the things I learned probably the most from Adrian here at TRAFFIT was it's one of the biggest benefits of being a founder of a startup is that you get to make the rules. You have to remind yourself that you get to make the rules. And he one of the things that probably wasn't so easy in Brand 24 because we were at a different time, a different growth, was, I remember coming to Adrian probably after about 18 months or a year, or 2 years, and saying, I think I'm pretty burned out. And I think that this word is a crazy word to use, but I was like, hey, listen, dude, like, even my physical health is deteriorating. I'm not feeling very proud of myself. And he literally said, like, why you just don't take some time for yourself? I was like, what are you talking about? We work in a startup, And he was like, listen, if you want to go to the gym between 9 and 11 every day of the week, do it. If you want to, yes, this is something that at least happy that is becoming more popular across the board now, which is one of the key takeaways from being in a startup is the flexibility that we overlook because we are never satisfied with the results. So, you have to remind last year at TRAFFIT, I think I took about 45 days off. And I'm proud of it now. Now I'm not ashamed of it. At the time, it was a little bit crazy, but I was like, you know what? Yes, we work hard. It's never done. Normally it's a very taxing level of work stress, but then you get to go. I drop my son off at preschool and pick him up on the same day. And the easiest way to know if you should feel guilty or not is you talk to someone that doesn't work in startups, and they go, wait, you can be in work at 9 and drop out at 2:30, switch to home office, and I'm like, yeah. You can wake up in the morning and say, it's not my day. Can't work today. It's just going to be terrible. And you get a lot of responsibility on your shoulders in startups, but you also get to make a lot more choices. And I think it's very easy to forget that. It's very easy to put all the pressure on your own shoulders of one more call, one more customer email, one more design, blah, blah, blah. But this is very controversial thought process for me, is that you're also not as important as you think you are. And if you take a week off, your results are probably going to be okay. The company's probably going to be okay. And I don't mean that in like, go take some time. Sometimes you have to shake people and say, listen, you are not as important as you think you are.
Yeah, and I think from the point of the company, you shouldn't be that important that everything crumbles when something happens to you, because that becomes a problem.
I had a controversial LinkedIn post a few months ago where I kind of said, like, the best career advice I can give any young person is to be extremely hard to replace. I did get a lot of pushback where people are like, no, because then how do you take time off and stuff? But I was like, listen, your kind of professional value certain time in your life is, how hard would it be for me to go and find another Mick? How hard would it be to find another master? Like, let that be your advantage. Now, I'm not saying forever. I think that if your superior, if your manager, if your founder is not concerned about how it would be to replace you, you probably have a problem. Because, again, I see this as two different topics. You can be very hard to replace and still take time off. Because, like you said, it's kind of the business's problem when you need to take a time off. On the other hand, we have to stop micro-analyzing what's happening. And this is why I used to say, like, sometimes the worst thing you can have for a sales team is that they have a monthly goal. But it's not fair, because if you take a week off in a month, it's 25% of the workload. What we used to do at GetResponse, and I still like it now, which is, hey, listen, it's a monthly target, but do you want to switch it to quarters? Because maybe you want to feel comfortable having 2 weeks off and having time to repair and stuff like that. So I think it's very rare that day off, that few days off, that week off. It shouldn't be so hard to do for both founders and for employees. But you can still be missed. Missing an employee, you're missing a founder. That's great. That's how it's supposed to be. But again, I think that we sometimes misunderstand those processes as being negatives when they don't have to be.
I wanted to come back to kind of your transition from Brand 24 to TRAFFIT, how that kind of came to be, and what I think a lot of people might find interesting. How did you become a co-founder while joining an already existing startup?
And this is a hot topic because I think there's a lot of different opinions on it. But the ironic thing is it kind of touches on what we talked before. When I decided that my journey at Brand24 had reached its limit, originally I had a huge yearning to go be a part of a bigger tech company. I was willing to drop that kind of C-level aspirations of being a leader, being in charge. And I had this huge yearning to go learn from a lot of other people who were better than me. And I had a couple of kind of, interviews set up in America for some of the US startups and stuff. And then COVID came and I couldn't take those roles. And in Poland, I had 2 or 3 offers that were kind of like come in, be C-level, come in at the leadership. And I was like, okay, well, it's nothing bad. I think I also had a hangover from Brand24 of like such an intense period of time of my life of not only being in a startup, learning how a startup works, going through the thing that also Brand24 was such a public eye company, etc. So, but when I had time to think about it, I was like, okay, I'm kind of happy to come back and look. And it was a very interesting scenario because TRAFFIT ends up being 6 minutes from my house. And until the day that originally kind of Adrian reached out to me and told me that he was interested, or am I interested, I didn't know that they existed. And I was like, how do I not know there's this 50 person company, software house, stroke, ATS? And anyway, and Adrian came in and basically said like, I've seen what you've done in other places. I've seen your experience. So like, I even, it's an ironic thing because he was obviously, you can imagine he was very, very humble about everything. And also I think that TRAFFIT probably saw themselves as this, that it wasn't equal, not into kind of like profiles, but I was coming out of Brand24, TRAFFIT was very small. And I think Adrian probably also had a big doubt as would I even join the company? But I liked the vision. I also had this thing that I was still expanding and I didn't think that was going to happen. But when I came out of GetResponse, I was only sales. When I went into Brand24, I was like international. I was running the international side, but mostly sales and customer success, a little bit of marketing, working with Michał. And then TRAFFIT door opened where it was like, hey, listen, how about you do sales, marketing, customer success for everything? So I even expanded my range of responsibilities. And that's where you, like you said, even get that gut feeling that, hey, listen, I do kind of feel like I'm coming in as like a co-founder, a second CEO. But so I kind of came in and it was great. It was like a 30 person company because it was kind of finishing its software house side of kind of work. But yeah, I mean, Adrian just kind of brought me in and said like, what do you want to do? Like this is our goal. This is our drive. And obviously came in and it was a very different scenario for me because TRAFFIT was a Polish market company. At Brand24, I was working in the US and working all over the world, but I didn't touch the Polish side. Again, thinking, okay, language barriers, etc. Fundamentally decided, you know what, it's not that problem. There's so much opportunity in Poland that with the right team around me, that we can build a strategy together, but my team can deliver it on the Polish market, etc. Let's kind of go for it. And again, I said, like, I truly believe that most founders, co-founders in startups under 30, 40 people, the best thing you can do for them is take things off their shoulders. So if you're listening to this podcast and you are like, even if you think, okay, well, I've not got that much experience, if you can take something off a founder's shoulders, they will love you for it. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. That's why they started on their own and they add employees because they can't do everything on their own. But we do get that thing from time to time where you can hire someone and they actually increase your workload because you hire someone and then every day they are, what should I do? How should I do it? Etc. So founders sometimes have to be careful that they can't, by increasing the team, you sometimes increase your workload. But I think what happened with Adrian, and it was the right time in my life, in my career, that I came in and I just literally said, give me all of that. Give me half of what you've been doing. I wanted, and this is why the topic of being a late co-founder is such a controversial one, because even I've been back and forth on what does it mean? Does it matter? I remember like a number of startup founders out there will say very openly, like, if you were not in the company on day one, you're not a co-founder. And I do totally understand that logic, but there's a misconception that I kind of ended up with the title of kind of like late co-founder or co-founder because I needed it. And I think that there's a real mutual benefit there. Like, I think that we said before the call, solo founders, that's a lonely place to be. I mean, that's a hard place to be. And I think it's probably extremely rare in companies where there was 2 or 3 founders that they ever need a fourth. They will have board members instead, shareholders, MSOP program, etc. And I think that what happened with me and Adrian is we just probably after about a year of working together, it was just natural. Adrian just said, I really realized that you're running this business with me. And I was like, well, I really feel like it's my business. What people have to fundamentally understand for me personally, this was not a promotion. It's not a career path. There's no career path that goes to late co-founder. It was fundamentally the fact that we were even interested in doing a round of fundraising. And VCs wanted to know, am I in? How long am I in for? What's my position? Why is there a random C-level person doing a lot of the talking when it should be founders? So it was just became a normal thing that kind of came out of it, let's say. And it also helped me feel more confident being one of the faces of TRAFFIT as well. That was a big thing as well. I want people to associate Mick with TRAFFIT. And that was a bridge that we had to build as well. But very, very controversial thing, not an easy thing. And I think, I love the trust that Adrian, the founder of TRAFFIT, and remember, people might not know is TRAFFIT was 6 years old when I joined. I mean, it's this very random late co-founder. But I think I have to fact check myself on this, but I think also the team at Napoleon Cat did this as well, where I think the COO Blanca became a late co-founder, and I was like, oh, good, it's not just me. It is happening in other places, but I think that's also because the founder of Napoleon Cat was a solo founder. So I think people have to understand that this was not some promotion pathway. And I can only talk from my perspective. It definitely comes with some weight. It's not an easy thing to say as well, because the first thing to know is that it changes your perception on the market, because recruiters are not going to try and hire co-founders. Heads of sales getting way more job offers than co-founders. So it's not a progression side for that side of things. And you are saying, yes, I'm taking on this role in the company.
Responsibility.
And it's not just positives, yeah? It's not just positive. It's like you said, it's responsibilities. It's like, okay, now these 30 employees are both of our responsibilities, the P&L, the investment, the money. So it's definitely pros and cons, I would say.
But you mentioned something that you were considering taking an investment, outside investor on board. What happened with that? Because from what I know, you don't have any outside investors.
Yeah, so I mean, that was something that we considered, and we went to a number of late stage topics with some of especially the Polish VCs and investors. And I think at the time, it turned out that we were very confident in the way that we were going to grow. And we decided that basically we think that because of the market, the way that it was at the time, probably like a lot of topics between investors and so on. One of the things was that we thought that we could, the multiples and the valuations were not really where we wanted them to be, but because they, as VCs should, they were making valuations on where we are today. And we were like, but we're going to get here tomorrow. And they were like, we don't know that. So we decided, well, hey, listen, like, you're right. We can go show you. But the other thing as well is that we don't plan to be a unicorn. And this counts out a lot of VCs. And I like it. I had some very nice talks with the Innovo team. I love them from my days at Brand24. And we were like, hey, listen, I would have some very nice informal talks with them saying, hey, listen, I think this is where we can get to. We can get to this valuation in 4 years. And they were like, can you get to $1 billion? And they didn't say it in a horrible way. What they basically said, Mick, is go build a business plan for $1 billion valuation. Nothing. Just imagine you had unlimited money, unlimited things. At the time, me and Adrian, we sat down and we had this kind of thought. We looked at this thought process and said, we don't want to. I don't think I want to. I didn't have that drive to be under the water for 6-7 years of rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds. And that was we had to do a lot of kind of like soul searching at that point. But we realized that, I understand how the VC market works, why they need to invest in companies like that. But ultimately, sometimes when you don't want to be that kind of company, we had two options. We could just pretend we were, take the money and not deliver, but I didn't want to do that. And then the second option is, well, what if we grow a different way and we don't go with VCs, we go a different way? And the nicest way, the thing that reassured us was we had quite a number of business angels in Poland who were like, we don't need unicorn status. We like what you're doing. We like the brand you're building. We'd be in. But very rightly to business angels, we're like, we'll be in, just get one VC, because the VC will take over all the due diligence. We will know that if you got a VC, the money is safe. And we just didn't get the VC. So it was a combination of the fact that we probably thought we were very confident in what we could deliver without the VC anyway. But also we just didn't want to be a unicorn.
So what made you think about getting an investors in the first place?
So the first thing was that investors came to us.
Okay.
And that is because, one of the things that was like, I think one of the things that happened in the very, very early days was that kind of, oh, who's this company that just hired Mick? We didn't know about them. Maybe there's an opportunity to invest. And that was extremely flattering, but it was the truth of, the fact that we always have to remember that VCs are always scouting. I think we have this perception that VCs have hundreds of requests a week, but in many cases, they are constantly also recruiting and asking who's a good startup. So that was one element. And the second one as well was that question of how much, is there a moment in the market that right now we could be faster? Doing great things on a small scale is very rewarding, but that question of, I wonder if we did this but twice as fast. I wonder if in 2 years the market will look different and we will look back and kick ourselves for not really, really going after it at that moment in time. And I would say that, in hindsight, that challenge didn't come so much. That challenge didn't come that much towards us. But the simple answer was probably that investors came to us because also the perception of TRAFFIT on the outside. I think we kind of hit the market like a meteor kind of thing. We just did 12 months of brand building and 12 months of being. So we got a lot of that initial like, ooh, I wonder. And then when we showed them our plans that we were not trying to become the number one in the world, it cooled off a little bit. So outside perception versus inside perception was also something that was probably confusing for VCs, but we were okay with that. Like that was our goal, was brand building to get customers, not to get investment. And I know a number of startups that build brand to get investment, and that's a smart thing to do. They're startups that kind of go for those awards, go for the accelerators, etc. But we were building brand because we wanted to generate customer revenue. And just by default, by doing that, we hooked a couple of VCs that were interested in what were we even doing.
Lately, you wrote something interesting on LinkedIn, talking about how how analytics can slow down marketing and growth strategies. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Could you expand on that?
Yes. I just, the funny thing is gave this speech at I Love Marketing, and then I gave it just yesterday in the Growth 52 community. So it's very fresh in my mind, but I just have a little, let's say, I like to be controversial. I like to do the things that other people are not doing anyway. But what I mean is that I feel that marketing became way too safe over time. And what I mean is like, go and talk to startups and they'd be like, okay, so we are going to hire a marketing leader and they're going to do SEO, performance marketing and events. And I'd be like, okay, what else? No, that's it. Like what I mean is we have this thing that we are trying to only do what we are so sure is going to work. So we do the proven tactics only. And the second thing that I think is challenging about analytics, why I'm kind of challenging people's thought process here, is because mostly analytics can only tell you if what you are doing is working or not working. It can't really tell you anything about what you're not doing. It can't tell you about the opportunity that's around the corner. So by default, by having an analytics growth strategy, you are not thinking creatively. You're thinking about squeezing what is already working, which is not wrong, but it's extremely limiting. And then the second thing as well is that I learned this, or I had this approach from the days in Brand 24, because we would have it, and I told this story yesterday, we would have it in Brand 24 that suddenly a conversion rate would drop, like whether or not it was traffic from organic or whatever it was. And for 3 days, we would sit with our heads in the analytics tools looking for what broke. And we were even like checking our deliverability of our emails, maybe our domain went down, maybe our loading. And the best way I can describe this is 3 days later, it went back up and we didn't change anything. And that's a nice story behind it. But what I mean is that some companies hold on to things that work so much that they will do that for weeks. How do we fix this? How do we fix this without actually being able to say to themselves, that channel is over. It's just over. It changed. I mean, the famous saying that is that marketers break things. And that's true. I remember at Brand 24, we were an early adopter of using Quora for growth. Quora now doesn't work for most new companies because we're all doing it. Yeah. But I know, I can imagine today there is a company that still spends 2 hours a day in Quora because they believe that they know it's working for Brand 24. Why it wouldn't work for them? And what I'm questioning is, well, hey, listen, instead of spending 20 hours investment into that, trying to find what's broken in analytics, spend that 20 hours building the next thing. And
yeah, I think it's kind of like an analytics trap because the data can be useful, but sometimes you spend too much on the data and not doing kind of their, let's say, real job.
Yeah, and we still have to remember that analytics is not perfect. I mean, we had it at Brand 24 once where we stopped doing a certain webinar series because we didn't have conversion. And then 2 weeks later, direct and organic traffic went down because sometimes people watch a webinar here and then they type your URL there. It's this concept of the fact that I saw companies who were doing things that they truly believed in and that they were bringing value, and they stopped doing it because Google Analytics said it doesn't work. And I'm just like, just do it. Just do it if you believe in it. So I just think we got to a little bit of an epidemic with this, where we are too relying on analytics and direct conversion tracking to tell us that something works or doesn't work. And we stopped using our intuition and we stopped reading our gut, which I know why we stopped doing it, because we can't prove that it's right or wrong. And that's why I said, like, one of the superpowers I have is that I'm just confident in the things that I believe in. And I'm going to do them anyway. If Google Analytics said it doesn't work, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And it was the end of that kind of topic. The end of that presentation was like, I was obviously being extreme about don't use analytics. Analytics are great to help guide you, but don't let them be your decision maker, because it's too analog. It's too yes, no. It doesn't read the gray areas. And that's why we were saying TRAFFIT, we launched TRAFFIT Library. There's no analytics tool on the planet that would tell me launching a library for a SaaS is a good idea. I did it anyway. And it's going to have intrinsic value down the line. I just believe in the fact that it's going to help us. But obviously the investment into those ideas has to be managed as well and has to be realistic. I didn't walk into Adrian and say, okay, I need 100,000 zlotys to build a library. I said, what's the minimum we can do? We can probably do this for about 3,000 zlotys. Let's do that. So I think that is a big thing that startups should realize that's their superpower versus corporates. Because there's no corporate on the planet that would have let me create a library, because they would have said, so we have to sometimes look at the things that other people are not doing and see that as an advantage, rather than I feel insecure doing that because no one else is doing it. Yeah. And sometimes I think we have to look at that and say it's an opportunity. But the last part of that little story is, which we can't avoid this part, is be okay. Also, you have to be okay if it's wrong. You have to be okay if it fails. Yeah. Try the next one. So that's why I had this thing. And I've got lots of friends that work in analytics companies who are like, Mick, what are you talking about? And I said, no, like listen to it in context. Like all I'm actually saying is go have some fun with your marketing. Go enjoy it. Go do the things that you want to do, even if analytics doesn't back you up.
Yeah, I love the example I think was given and during the last Aula Polska event. I think it was from NetGuru that they said that they knew that their customers saw their ad in New York. They had a display there with their ad, but only after talking to them, they learned that they didn't see it in New York. They see it on LinkedIn, and they only saw it on LinkedIn because they were following the CEO and because the CEO is actually building their own brand. And I think those are also the aspect that sometimes it's hard to catch that through your analytics.
And it's such a good example because this is also a thing now that in 2 years, having the Times Square advert is going to mean very little. Why? Because everyone has understood that you can do this for $2,000 now. But in the same way, not to be pessimistic about this, I know someone right now that is absolutely killing it by sending physical postcards to leads because everybody stopped doing it. And we are now in a culture where if we get something in the post, we are like, oh, nobody sends me a postcard anymore. So what's nice about these tactics, these campaigns, these things is that even the ones that get saturated, don't count them out forever because they might come back into trend again, just like fashion and clothes. Yeah. So what I mean is it should make every single person in marketing and growth in startups feel better because most doors don't close. They just change. The worst thing I think anybody can do is only do what everyone else is doing. That's a challenge. That's something you've got to be careful of doing. Like I said, sadly, the New York Times Square billboard will become passé in the next 12 months because I even did the research. I know we could have a traffic one there in 2 weeks, but why not do that while you're first? NetGuru have done it recently. Brand24 did it recently, and I know the results were fantastic. And that's great. And again, it's nothing to do with New Yorkers. It's to do with the fact that this concept of we made it, we did it, it's great. What do I do now? TRAFFIT, I think about what's the opposite of that. That's how my brain functions. And I literally, I'm going to even tell you because the funny thing is why not? My goal now is to have a billboard in Gdynia and say, we are proud of Gdynia. We don't need to be on Times Square kind of thing. So my brain is always thinking about what is everybody doing and can we do it in a different way? What is everybody doing and can we do it in a way that helps people or makes people interested? But yeah, exactly. And there's no way you can, and who knows that probably in a year, everybody's talking now about how ineffective, for example, like a Super Bowl advertisement is. You can pay $2 million for a Super Bowl ad, or you can pay $2 million and Mr. Beast will put you in his next YouTube video. YouTube's going to have, Mr. Beast right now is going to have way more impressions. 10 years from now, a TV ad might be the coolest campaign ever because people stopped doing it. And I think, again, there was a time in my career where I hated that. I hated the fact that there just wasn't somewhere I could read the rules of how to grow a startup. Now I'm 40 and I like it. It makes my day different. So you got to embrace it a little bit. And yeah, even when it kicks you, because it's a lot of the time it will, you got to just come into work the next day and try again.
I think we touched on many, many interesting topics. So just wrap it up. Can you tell people where they can find you and they can follow you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, definitely grab me on LinkedIn. It's definitely a place where I hang out. Like I said, I'm old now, so I kind of let go of Facebook and I don't have Instagram, sadly. I'm sorry, but yeah. So LinkedIn is the great place, and again, really encourage people to tell me what they disagree with. What part of what I said today where they go, hey, listen, it's easy for you to say that because X. I will use a little plug that if you ever we recently created a community called Growth 52, which is basically where once a week we bring someone in and we ask them to tell us what's working for them today. Because again, I'm craving that. I love being unique and I love coming up with ideas, but some days they are just not there. And it's really nice to have someone come in and say, you know what, actually, we went back to WhatsApp messaging our customers and they love it. So Growth 52, if not, but let's start in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place to catch me. Like you said, if you scroll through probably about 2 weeks of my post, you'll know exactly about who I am and what kind of things I talk about. But I also really appreciate you inviting me on here. I think, sometimes I think my story is unique but not interesting. And all I hope is that there was one thing today that people heard that made them go, oh, I didn't think about it. That would be cool if that happened.
I think you do have a very interesting point of view and a very interesting kind of path that got you where you are. So thank you very much.
Sprawdź inne odcinki MamStartup Podcast na Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast i Google Podcast.